Sumitomo Corporation. And SMBC.
Welcome back to Asia First. It is 9:30 Singapore, Hong Kong time. Here's another look at our top stories. Clash over COVID-19. The U.S. gained support from the WHO-led investigating team as the Biden administration pushes to probe whether the new coronavirus came from animals or a lab in China. While Chinese officials accuse the Americans of ignoring facts and truth, plus political manipulation. Deja vu for Victoria. Millions of people in Australia's second most populous state are now under a strict 7-day lockdown as authorities race to track the spread of the highly infectious coronavirus variant.
The next 7 days in Victoria will be very challenging. And of course, we are very mindful of the distress and the difficulty that this will impose upon people right across Victoria.
And coming up, even as Malaysians flock to COVID-19 vaccination centers with infections and deaths rising steadily, some people aren't showing up for scheduled jabs, pushing the government to take action.
Some 52,000 were reportedly not turning up for their appointments. Now, authorities are now mulling actions against them, including getting them to pay a fine.
The rocket fire may have stopped a week ago, but now a new battle is raging over the recent Gaza conflict.
The UN Human Rights Council has voted to launch a probe into possible crimes and systematic abuses. Israel calls it shameful. The U.S. deeply regrets it, while Hamas welcomes it.
The vote barely scraped through 24 to 23. Pakistan had raised a resolution on behalf of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation.
Hamas is urging the council to go further, calling for punishment. Israel accuses the council of defaming a democracy trying to defend itself.
Another shameful day at the Human Rights Council of the United Nations. They shamelessly whitewash a brutal genocidal terrorist organization that not only tries to kill Israeli civilians, but abuses Gaza's civilian population, exploiting it as a human shield. That's a double war crime.
270 Palestinians died in the conflict, mostly in Gaza, while Hamas rockets killed 10 people in Israel. And the UN's human rights chief called out both sides, saying indiscriminate and disproportionate Israeli airstrikes may constitute war crimes, while Hamas's indiscriminate rocket attacks violated humanitarian law.
The truce brokered by Egypt is entering day 8. Israeli media say the Egyptians want a long-term ceasefire and have invited Israel, the Palestinian Authority, and Hamas for a summit. Israel's foreign minister will visit Cairo next week. The Israelis are apparently demanding separate talks at the summit with Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, and they are linking reconstruction in Gaza to the return of Israeli captives.
It's no fluke that India was slammed by back-to-back devastating cyclones this month.
Scientists warn climate change is causing the Indian Ocean to heat up rapidly, and that is churning up more cyclones and more intense storms.
Now, the Indian Ocean is the world's third largest body of water, covering 20% of Earth, flanked by Asia, Australia, and Africa. The western side, Arabian Sea, where temperatures hover below 28 degrees Celsius, recorded 93 cyclones in the 20th century. And multiply that by nearly fourfold for the warmer eastern side, the Bay of Bengal. Worries are the Arabian Sea temperatures are catching up.
Experts say the entire Indian Ocean is warming up faster than the Atlantic or Pacific. Last week, Cyclone Tauktae, among the most powerful storm in decades, formed in the Arabian Sea, slamming into India's west coast, killing at least 150 people.
And this week, Cyclone Yas, which formed over the Bay of Bengal, hit the east coast of India, killing at least 5 people. The scientists say India is very vulnerable because 1 out of 7 people live on the coast, and that number is projected to triple in the next few decades. The wider region is at risk too. A hotter Indian Ocean has been linked to Australia's bushfires, African floods, and locust swarms.
India is scrapping local trials for what it called well-established foreign coronavirus vaccines.
Now, this in a bid to accelerate its inoculation program. Last month, India pleaded to last-track shots from Pfizer-BioNTech, Johnson & Johnson, and Moderna. But discussions stalled after the government insisted on local trials in a dispute over indemnity.
Now, a government official says they're expecting doses from Pfizer as soon as July. He says the government is still examining the request of pharmaceutical companies to grant them legal protection.
We are looking at what their expectations from the government are, and they are looking at what our expectations from them are. That's the process in which this will move, because they have to come into India, they have to apply for licensure, so that's one path. And there are imperatives of cold chain and supply, etc. So that's being looked at.
Only about 11% of India's 1.3 billion population has received at least 1 dose of vaccine. It has the lowest rate among countries with the highest number of infections.
Well, vaccine supplies and raw materials to make vaccines will likely top the agenda when India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar meets his U.S. counterpart Antony Blinken and other senior Biden administration officials today. This is the first trip by an Indian minister to Washington since President Joe Biden assumed office in January. Neha Punya tells us more.
Ross of Commerce here. And
the Indian foreign minister has a packed schedule ahead of him. He's expected to meet U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Friday, and the two are likely to discuss, among other things, security in the Indo-Pacific and the Quad initiative that's aimed at countering China's growing influence in the region. The U.S. has said it is keen to convene an in-person meeting of Quad members, including Australia, India, and Japan later this year. There are also meetings scheduled with Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, and U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai. The Indian foreign minister's visit comes at a time when New Delhi has clashed with U.S. tech giants like Facebook and Twitter over new social media rules, but top of the agenda is going to be vaccine cooperation. While India's daily COVID-19 caseload has dipped, the country is still recording more infections and deaths than any other country in the world, and despite being the world's largest vaccine manufacturer, India's own vaccination drive has failed to take off due to severe shortages. Only 3% of all Indians are fully vaccinated. Which is why experts say New Delhi will be hoping that the Biden administration will release a large chunk of its spare vaccines to India. The U.S. plans to export 80 million doses from its stockpile by June to needy countries. Talks are also expected to cover the smoothing of exports of raw materials that India needs to scale up vaccine production at home. More than 200 ingredients come to the country from the U.S. Last month, caving under increasing public criticism, the Biden administration finally loosened restrictions on the